Hello, welcome students. We have a new session on contemporary Indian philosophy as a critique of social reality. Great thinkers and revolutionaries recognize the major challenges before a society or the humanity as a whole. They first of all realize how and why the status quo and the prescribed ways of life become retrogressive and reactionary in a fast changing world. The 19th century India had been exposed to such a challenge, which was in fact double edged with the atrocities of colonialism in combination with the homegrown social evils like caste discrimination and its allied vices. Contemporary Indian philosophers had the responsibility to seek the means to liberate the masses of the land from their long-standing physical, mental and cultural slavery. Hence, in the turbulent decades of the 19th century, philosophy could no more remain mere inner vision of thinkers without becoming the practical aid to the mounting demand for political and social reforms throughout the country. Indian Renaissance movement and introduction. Thanks to the widespread awareness created through the tireless efforts of the great philosophers of the country, as the cultural soil of India was getting set for radical changes in the political and religious life of people, that culminated in the Indian Renaissance movement. From a sociological point of view, the Renaissance was a part of the process of modernization in the country. It reflected the reformative spirit obviously inspired by the growing impact of Western culture and technology. Yet, apart from the direct influence of Westernization on the economy and culture of India, a good majority of philosophically minded thinkers were inclined to revise and re-examine the traditional spiritualism of classical Indian literature, especially the Upanishads. Their aim was not a mere interpretation of the philosophical texts and tenets, but a thorough research for some means to cure the maladies in Indian society. Thus, the Renaissance led to a rediscovery of the perennial values inherent in the rich tradition of the country, with a view to make them the weapons for social change progress. Thus, modern Indian thought is mostly a synthesis of ancient Indian values and modern Western science. Renaissance thinkers of India understood well that if we can synthesize the scientific and humanistic spirit of modern Western with the spiritualistic core of the Eastern tradition, it will certainly be a potential source of strength and inspiration not only to us but also to the rest of the world. Indian Renaissance was not a mere revivalism of the past, but a genuine attempt to work out the value potentials of our age-old philosophical visions for removing the deep-rooted evils in our socio-cultural life. So, they synthesized the finest element of our culture with the scientific and humanistic culture of the West. Contemporary Indian thought shows a deep concern for the problems of human life and the destiny of man, and in this sense all modern Indian thinkers were humanist. Their humanistic ideas were inspired not only by the dissatisfaction about colonial domination and exploitation, but also by the struggle against the social evils like caste system, untouchability, sati, child marriage, etc. As it was stated by Swami Ranganathananda, the inheritance is ours. We have got it mutilated, mixed with so many extraneous factors, so many weakenings of its precious elements. It was the great purpose and motive of the Indian Renaissance of the modern age to clarify that heritage, to purify it, to strengthen it, and to leave it richer for the coming generations. The 19th century thinkers, humanists, philosophers, teachers and political leaders have done that work to a great deal. The Renaissance philosophers of India examined the problems of our country from a nationalistic and patriotic point of view. Yet their ideal was spiritualist nationalism, was founded on the metaphysical vision of the unity and equality of all beings that exist as the manifestation of an absolute spiritual principle. This had enabled the spiritually inclined philosophers like Swami Vivekananda to develop a wider perspective of internationalism and humanism. They were conscious of the crisis being faced not only by the people of India, but by the humanity as a whole, and hence they projected a vision of universal fraternity. Modern Indian thinkers, in their pursuit of social change, had rarely cut themselves off from the mainsprings of Indian culture and tradition. Instead, they tried to seek the practical means to social change in the traditional wisdom of the land. As stated by Sri Asianand, modern Indian Renaissance represents not only the coverage of the nationalist mainstream of the pre-independence period, but also reflects the total throb of the Indian spirit. The civilization's souls, as personified by a large number of national leaders from Ram Mohan Roy to Sri Ramakrishna to Vinoba Bhave. While analyzing the philosophical mind of contemporary Indian thinkers, we can find out some common features that characterize their views and positions. Now, we will discuss about humanism. It is obvious that those who had contributed to the making of philosophy in contemporary India were all humanists in one sense or the other. The popular concept of humanism is that it is an outlook which elevates the human being above everything else and demonstrates the distinction of the species over other beings. It may be defined as an attempt to explore the ways and means to bring about common welfare and progress of mankind through an all-round enrichment of individual lives. The supreme concern for the human being is the core of every humanistic philosophy. An adequate understanding of the human being in the context of the total environment is its basic prerequisite. Humanism underlines the infinite potentialities and possibilities of the species. It is also an attitude which attaches primary importance to the human aspirations and welfare. Most of the philosophers of contemporary India had asserted their affiliation to Vedantic spiritualism. Anyway, we can find some exceptions like M. N. Roy, who had rejected religious spiritualism as a hindrance to the rational development of human beings. Yet on the basis of scientific facts, he had retained the humanistic spirit by elevating the human beings as naturally, biologically endowed with rationality and the urge for freedom. Contemporary Indian thinkers had given their full attention to the problems of their age and sought rational and practical solutions to them. Most of them sought the solutions to the deep rooted problems in the Indian society in the age-old doctrines of the Upanishads. We can find this attitude clearly demonstrated in the ideas and actions of Swami Vivekananda, Sri Narayana Guru, Sri Aurobindo. Their approach was not limited to the theoretical interpretations of Vedanta Darshana, but goes beyond to its practical potentialities to overcome the stagnation in our social life and culture. The term Neo-Vedanta is apt to specify the search for the practical significance of the age-old Vedanta Darshana. It actually provided them with a strong metaphysical foundation for the ethics of unity and equality of humanity. The main objectives of all social reform movements led by the contemporary Indian thinkers was the creation of modern progressive nation in India. The reformers wanted India to become a nation like any other Western nation, active, enterprising, free and moral. They called for a reform movement to address the rigid but reactionary customs of a blindly orthodox society. A majority of the contemporary Indian thinkers further dependent on the value prescriptions in classical Indian systems to attain the progressive goals of human dignity and equality beyond all social discriminations in terms of caste, creed and economic status. This practical orientation of contemporary Indian philosophers was largely determined by the will and vigor of its representatives to attack the social evils and dogmatic customs prevalent in the Indian society through centuries. Now, the critical position. There is no doubt that on the basis of this philosophical foundation, it is possible to bring about a synthesis of individual and society. Freedom and law, ethics and politics, material life and religion, nationalism and internationalism. That is why the Neo-Vedanta philosophy is said to be much more practical than traditional Vedanta philosophy. For the same reason, it is possible to discover scientific, rationalistic, freedom-oriented, socialistic, integral and pluralistic tendencies in the ideas of our contemporary philosophers. In fact, Neo-Vedantins had succeeded in tracing the roots of the modernist perceptions of human dignity and equality in the philosophical tradition of ancient India. Contemporary Indian philosophers like M. N. Roy and Dr. Ambedkar, of course, had radical disagreement with this spiritualistic path. Yet they had emphasized the dilapidated social scenario with incredible atrocities imposed in the name of religious dogmas. They had shared the common concern of contemporary Indian thinkers and reformers for eradicating the social evils in Indian society. Hence, we can say that all the prominent representatives of contemporary Indian philosophy had demonstrated an obvious critical attitude to the social and cultural conditions of India in the colonial period. Rajaram Mohan Roy has been rightly regarded as the father of Indian Renaissance, as he had taken the initial efforts to awaken the Indian society from the slumbers of last several centuries of slavery. He was the first religious reformer of the 19th century, and his efforts left a deep impression upon the social, political and religious thinking of his days. His most significant contributions to the beginning of Indian Renaissance was the establishment of an organization called Brahmo Samaj. He pleaded for scientific education along with the Oriental studies in India. The central aim of the Reformation movements started by Roy was to bring about spiritual integration of humankind. He worked hard to abolish the disabilities of the woman and the downtrodden masses of India, to bring about social and political reforms through the enactment of a new legislations. In the social sphere, Ram Mohan Roy opposed all inequality, child marriage, sati, polygamy, caste system and rest of problems that beset the Indian society during his period. In the religious field, he was against the practice of priestly hypocrisy, idol worship, rituals and sacrifice, which was then common practice in India. He stood for the abolition of sati on ground of justice and humanity. This was the same reason which made him to fight against polygamy and caste system. Swami Vivekananda was the most effective exponent of the Vedanta in the modern age, and he developed it into a very strong and inspiring philosophy which impressed the West and the East alike. His mission was to reassert the Upanishadic ideal of the oneness of all creations as truly relevant in the modern era. Hence, his philosophy is called Neo-Vedanta, which was scientific, humanistic, universal and in tune with the demands of the modern age. His Advaita philosophy recognizes the unity of all religions and asserts the basic principles of the divinity of man and the essential spirituality of life. Vivekananda said, religion to help mankind must be ready and able to help him in whatever condition he is, in servitude or in freedom, in the depths of degradation or the heights of purity. Everywhere equally it should be able to come to his aid. The principles of Vedanta or the ideal of religion or whatever you may call it will be fulfilled by its capacity for performing this great function. Vivekananda emphasized the practical aspect of religion and asked people to worship and offer to the poor what they offered to the idol in the temple. Swami Vivekananda was against casteism and untouchability. His views on society were essentially and practically humanistic, and it was based on his remarkable faith in the inherent power of man. Swami Vivekananda opposed the oppressions on the basis of caste distinctions and the practice of child marriage. He strongly urged for providing opportunities for women in order to enable them utilize their abilities. Following the tradition of the social reformers of the Renaissance period, he strongly advocated the elimination of inequalities based upon caste system. He said, "I must frankly tell you that I am neither a caste breaker nor a mere social reformer. I have nothing to do with directly with your caste. You like your own caste, but that is no reason why you should hate another man of another caste. It is love and love alone that I preach, and I base my teaching on the great Vedantic truth of the sameness and omnipresence of the soul of the universe." Besides casteism and untouchability, the main evil in Indian society as diagnosed by Vivekananda was the lower status of women. His attempt was to restore the individuality of both men and women without losing their innate spiritual power. Vivekananda was successful in cultivating the necessary awareness about the prevailing social injustice and inequity and about the urgency of resolving them. Gandhi had advocated a worldview in which there was no distinction on the basis of religion, nationality, race. As a humanist, he was deeply concerned with the solutions to the social, economic and political problems. He emphasized, "I shall work for an India in which the poorest shall feel that it is their country in whose making they have an effective voice, an India in which there shall be no high class and low class of people, an India which all communities shall live in perfect harmony. There can be no room in such an India for the curse of untouchability." Gandhi laid emphasis on human equality, and so his desire for the removal of untouchability was as strong as his desire for freedom. He held that untouchability, as it is practiced in Hinduism, is a sin against God and man, and is therefore like a poison slowly eating into the very vitals of Hinduism. Keeping to the ideals of social and political justice and equality, he vehemently condemned caste discrimination as an impassable barrier in the path of India's progress. Gandhi was quite aware of the fact that without the social and material well-being of those people who are treated as untouchable, India can never attain true self-rule or Swaraj. Gandhi appealed to the dominant caste to learn to respect human values and treat all human beings equally. As the positive means to end untouchability, Gandhi called for a imparting education to children of lower caste and to build up a self-reliant village and village panchayats. Gandhi's attitude towards untouchability springs from his basic conviction that we are all equal in that we share the same inherent divine power. The Gandhian ideal of Sarvodaya included the welfare of the untouchables and the downtrodden classes. Hence, for Gandhi, the welfare of all, or Sarvodaya, means the welfare of the lowest in the society, that is Antyodaya. Tagore had a humanist approach to social problems. He was a severe critic of caste system and repeatedly declared that caste system and its attendant practice of untouchability were the darkest blows of Indian society. Tagore, as a writer and a poet, exposed the malady in all its details. Through his literary works, he also protested against the evils of child marriage, the Parda system, Sati and other evils which existed in society during his days. He condemned domination of the male over the female and wanted to ensure equal status of man and woman in society. Thus, Tagore visualized a society based on perfect harmony and cooperation and free from exploitation. Such a society, Tagore believed, would be congenial to the perfection of the divine in all human beings. Tagore held that freedom was the precondition for life and progress. Harmonious interdependence is the guarantee for actual freedom. So, freedom is not something found outside society, but is possible only within society. For achieving freedom, it is necessary to remove the barriers erected by the power of money, organized propaganda and the caste system. According to Tagore, freedom in its true sense is the liberation of human minds from the fetters of orthodox dogmas and superstitions. This emphasis of human freedom is the basis of Tagore's religion of man, humanism and his faith in democracy. Tagore asserted that no nation could solve its own problems unless the problem of humanity as a whole are solved. Projecting internationalism as the need of our time, Tagore's message of love and universal brotherhood and his ideal of universal man and one world are the expressions of his humanistic attitude. Next, M.N. Roy had a strong disagreement with the spiritualistic inclination of other contemporary Indian thinkers. He tried to develop a radical humanism in tune with the developments in the modern science. His new humanism emphasized the innate rationality and urge for freedom as biological traits of the human being. Rationality, according to Roy, is the microcosmic echo of the inherent order in nature. Hence, there cannot be any remarkable natural differences between human beings who are all endowed with the power of reasoning and the desire for freedom. As a humanist, M.N. Roy was critical about religion and Marxian socialism, as they both sacrifice the individual on the altar of collective ego. Roy said that new humanism is not an abstract philosophy nor merely a social philosophy or a political or economic theory. It is a set of principles which have relevance to all branches of man's life and social existence and shows a way towards their recognition. New humanism encourages self-conscious restoration of confidence in human potentiality. Roy's humanism is thus based on the supremacy and dignity of man. It is a doctrine of human sovereignty supported by modern science. Roy proclaimed the primacy of man without restoring to any superhuman or supernatural hypothesis. Roy held that the essence of human existence is the urge for freedom. Radical humanism considers equality and liberty as equally necessary. The easiest means of social change, according to it, was to make man and woman realize their inherent rationality as the sound basis for their morality. Roy held that the dignity and freedom of individual were being endangered by dictatorship as well as parliamentary democracy. These two challenges have relegated the individual to an insignificant position. Roy suggested that a proper form of government can be established only on the basis of human freedom as its aim. For this, he offered an alternative radical democracy. In this scheme of power goes to the people's committee and not to the political parties. The new humanism of M.N. Roy is therefore a different way of analyzing and resolving the human problems. Yet, his concern for human dignity, equality and freedom is as obvious as it is within the spiritualist leaders of Indian Renaissance. Dr. Ambedkar's work was qualitatively different from that of his predecessors. He stood for the social liberation, economic emancipation and political advancement of the downtrodden millions. Ambedkar felt that caste system brought injustice to the lower caste by denying them basic human rights and preventing them from rising to the cultural level of higher caste. So, the untouchables are forced to remain uncivilized and backward. This prevented the feeling of fraternity in the Indian society. The lower caste are not treated as equals in society and were discriminated as untouchables. Untouchability, according to Ambedkar, meant the imposition of social disabilities on a person just for the reason of their birth in certain caste. He, however, consoled the oppressed people not to be compliant with and obedient to inequality and injustice. He wanted them to fight against the forces of oppression and exploitation. But he wanted them to do this for remodeling the society in accordance with the norms and provisions as enshrined in the Constitution of India. Here we see that Dr. Ambedkar combined in himself the role of a social reformer, a political leader and a spiritual guide of the untouchables. He therefore played a unique role in shaping the mind and the political outlook of the marginalized communities in India. Dr. Ambedkar foresaw that only a casteless society that has inner strength can defend itself and attain the goal of independence. As it is stated by Dr. Jadava, Dr. Ambedkar's social humanism is a philosophical thought in which man's social situation and the analysis of its problems have been given utmost importance. Man's dignity, protection of equal rights, values of individuality, welfare of common people, freedom of expression, just social order, right relations based on fraternity, man's all round developments, man's liberty to express himself in the interest of new construction and perennial movement based on activeness of the exploited people are some of the main features of Dr. Ambedkar's social humanism. Srinarayana Guru had effectively fought against the caste system in Kerala. In his works like Jati Lakshanam and Jati Nirnayam, he advocated the message of one caste, one religion and one God for man. He was against the variation of religions and caste. He stated that the God Almighty is the one for all religions. He advised people that man should become good irrespective of his religious belief. Guru called on the people to strengthen through organization and to attain freedom through education. He had given much importance to education. According to Guru, the whole of humankind belongs to one species and it is absurd that human beings are treated as belonging to various castes and religions. He asserted that this ridiculous discrimination had rendered human life miserable. In those days in Kerala, people in the lower caste keeps both social and physical distance from their upper caste masters. Guru held that Jati is something which has not real existence, a baseless notion, a man-made social prejudice. He thought that the best way to eradicate this negative phenomenon was an equally negative way. Therefore, Guru directed the people to ignore it conscientiously. Hence, he stated that do not ask caste, do not tell caste, do not think caste. Guru's enlightenment that in everything there manifests the same divine power is the solid foundation of his battle against social discrimination among humans based on caste, religion or race. He said, humanness is the common distinguishing feature of all human beings as bovinity is for cows. Thus, the entire human race belongs to one Jati or kind. Guru held that there are no different Jatis, but all human beings belong to one Jati or species. Srinarayana Guru stands out as the supreme symbol of hope and redemption to the depressed classes. Guru was considerably pained at the sufferings of Avarnas, and his mission was to emancipate them from the inhuman torture and extortion of the upper caste. Guru's aim was to rescue them from the atmosphere of servitude and to make the downtrodden people self-reliant and liberated. What makes Guru different in this context is that while Rajaram Mohan Roy, Dayananda Saraswati, Mahadev Ranade and others had tried to tie down the suffering classes within the confines of religion, Guru was breaking new ground with a hitherto unknown ideal. Whatever may be the religion, it is enough if man improves his lot, thus weaning him away from the clutches of religion and uniting him into the fraternity through the bond of love. In conclusion, it is clear that from the above account that all the thinkers of contemporary India were eager to address the social problems that plagued the Indian society through centuries. The spiritualistic and humanistic tendencies have equal importance in their social philosophy, and they had not refused the influence of the West. By developing such a synthesizing approach, the great leaders of Indian Renaissance had succeeded in prescribing practical solutions to many problems faced by our country. They could evolve a social philosophy which will guide the nation to a prosperous future and will serve as a guide for the rest of the world. Our leaders realized the need for a united Indian society and the requirement for the participation of each and every Indian in the freedom movement. To ensure the participation of all, it was necessary to remove the inequalities prevalent in the Indian society by creating a just and egalitarian social order. Our leaders paid special attention to the protection and promotion of the interest of the downtrodden and weaker sections of the society. The leaders wanted to eradicate the sinful practices like untouchability, ostracism, suppression and exploitation to which many sections of society were subjected. We have to rededicate ourselves to this great ideal which they put forward and for which they violently fought and relentlessly worked throughout their life. That would be the best tribute to these great leaders of our countries. In this session, there are few assignments for you to work out. First one, modern Indian thought is mostly a synthesis of ancient Indian values and modern Western science. Analyze this statement. And second one, examine the importance of humanism in the philosophy of contemporary Indian thinkers. And third assignment is that discuss the silent futures of M.N. Roy's New Humanism. And fourth one, briefly explain the religious reforms of Srinarayana Guru. And last one, why did Gandhi consider untouchability as a sin against God and man? There are some reference book for you. Contemporary Indian Philosophy by Basant Kumar Lal. Next, Modern Indian Thought by V.S. Naravane. Another one, New Humanism, a Manifesto by M.N. Roy. And Dr. Ambedkar and his Humanism by Dr. Jadava. Ambedkar and his Essential Writings by Valerian Rodrigues. And Gandhian Theory and Social Reconstruction by Parameshwari Dayal. Hope this session is beneficial for you, and see you on another session on another topic. Goodbye.